a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Tarare. Tarare, sometimes spelled Tarare, was a French showman and soldier, noted for his unusual eating habits. Able to eat vast amounts of meat, he was constantly hungry. His parents could not provide for him, and he was turned out of the family home as a teenager. He traveled France in the company of a band of thieves and prostitutes, before becoming the warm-up act to a traveling charlatan. He would swallow corks, stones, live animals and a whole basketful of apples. He then took this act to Paris, where he worked as a street performer. At the start of the War of the First Coalition, Tarare joined the French Revolutionary Army. With military rations unable to satisfy his large appetite, he would eat any available food from gutters and refuse heaps, but his condition still deteriorated through hunger. He was hospitalised due to exhaustion, and became the subject of a series of medical experiments to test his eating capacity, in which, among other things, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting, ate live cats, snakes, lizards and puppies, and swallowed eels whole without chewing. Despite his unusual diet, he was of normal size and appearance, and showed no signs of mental illness other than what was described as an apathetic temperament. General Alexandre de Beauharnais decided to put Tarare's abilities to military use, and he was employed as a courier by the French army, with the intention that he would swallow documents, pass through enemy lines, and recover them from his stool once safely at his destination. Tarare could not speak German, and on his first mission was captured by Prussian forces, severely beaten, and underwent a mock execution before being returned to French lines. Chastened by this experience, he agreed to submit to any procedure that would cure his appetite, and was treated with laudanum, tobacco pills, wine vinegar and soft-boiled eggs. The procedures failed, and doctors could not keep him on a controlled diet. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for offal in gutters, rubbish heaps and outside butchers' shops, and attempted to drink the blood of other patients in the hospital and to eat the corpses in the hospital morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. He reappeared 4 years later in Versailles with a case of severe tuberculosis, and died shortly afterwards, following a lengthy bout of exudative diarrhea. Childhood and early life. Tarare was born in rural France, near Lyon, around 1772. His date of birth is unrecorded and it is not even known if Tarare was his real name or a nickname. As a child, Tarare had a huge appetite, and by his teens could eat a quarter of a bullock, weighing as much as Tarare himself, in a single day. By this time, his parents could not provide for him and had forced him to leave home. For some years after this, he toured the country with a roaming band of thieves and prostitutes, begging and stealing for food, before gaining employment as a warm-up act to a traveling charlatan. Tarare would draw a crowd by eating corks, stones, and live animals, and by swallowing an entire basketful of apples one after the other. He would eat ravenously and was particularly fond of snake meat. In 1788, Tarare moved to Paris to work as a street performer. He appears to have been successful in general, but on one occasion the act went wrong and he had severe intestinal obstruction. Members of the crowd carried him to the Hôtel Dieu hospital, where he was treated with powerful laxatives. He made a full recovery and offered to demonstrate his act by eating his surgeon's watch and chain. M. Giraud, the surgeon, was unimpressed by the offer, and warned him that if he did so, he would cut Tarare open to recover the items. Appearance and behaviour. Despite his unusual diet, Tarare was slim and of average height. At the age of 17, he weighed only. He was described as having unusually soft fair hair and an abnormally wide mouth, in which his teeth were heavily stained and on which the lips were almost invisible. When he had not eaten, his skin would hang so loosely that he could wrap the fold of skin from his abdomen around his waist. When full, his abdomen would distend, like a huge balloon. The skin of his cheeks was wrinkled and hung loosely, and when stretched out, he could hold 12 eggs or apples in his mouth. His body was hot to the touch, and he sweated heavily. He constantly had foul body odor. He was described as stinking, to such a degree that he could not be endured within a distance of 20 paces. This smell would get noticeably worse after he had eaten. His eyes and cheeks would become bloodshot, a visible vapor would rise from his body, and he would become lethargic, during which time he would belch noisily, and his jaws would make swallowing motions. He had chronic diarrhea, which was said to be fetid beyond all conception. Despite his large intake of food, he did not appear either to vomit excessively or to gain weight. Aside from his eating habits, his contemporaries saw no apparent signs of mental illness or unusual behaviour in him, other than an apparently apathetic temperament with a complete lack of force and ideas. The cause of Tarare's behaviour is not known. While there are other documented cases of similar behaviour from the period, none of the subjects other than Tarare were autopsied, and there have been no modern documented cases resembling Tarare. Hypothyroidism can induce an extreme appetite, rapid weight loss, profuse sweating, heat intolerance, and fine hair. Bonderson speculates that Tarare had a damaged amygdala. It is known that injuries to the amygdala in animals can induce polyphagia. Military service. On the outbreak of the War of the First Coalition, Tarare joined the French Revolutionary Army. Unfortunately for him, military rations were insufficient to satisfy his appetite. He would carry out tasks for other soldiers in return for a share of their rations and scavenge on the dung heap for scraps, but this was not enough to satisfy him. He was admitted to the military hospital at Sault-Sautrin with a case of extreme exhaustion. He was granted quadruple rations, but remained hungry. He would scavenge for garbage in gutters and refuse containers, eat the scraps of food left by other patients, and creep into the apothecary's room to eat the poultices. Military surgeons could not understand his appetite. Tarare was ordered to remain in the military hospital to take part in physiological experiments designed by Dr. Courville and Georges Didier, Baron Percy, surgeon-in-chief of the hospital. Courville and Percy decided to test Tarare's capacity for food. A meal had been prepared for 15 labourers near the hospital gates. Although generally hospital staff restrained Tarare in the presence of food, on this occasion Courville allowed him to reach the table undisturbed. Tarare ate the entire meal of 2 large meat pies, plates of grease and salt and 4 gallons of milk, and then immediately fell asleep. Courville noted that Tarare's belly became taut and inflated like a large balloon. On another occasion Tarare was presented with a live cat. He tore the cat's abdomen open with his teeth and drank its blood, and proceeded to eat the entire cat aside from its bones, before vomiting up its fur and skin. Following this, hospital staff offered Tarare a variety of other animals including snakes, lizards and puppies, all of which were eaten. He also swallowed an entire eel without chewing, having first crushed its head with his teeth. Service as a military courier. After several months he spent as an experimental case, military authorities began to press for Tarare to be returned to active duty. Dr. Courville was keen to continue his investigations into Tarare's eating habits and digestive system, and approached General Alexandre de Beauharnais with a suggestion that Tarare's unusual abilities and behavior could be put to military use. A document was placed inside a wooden box which was in turn fed to Tarare. 2 days later, the box was retrieved from his excrement, with the document still in legible condition. Courville proposed to de Beauharnais that Tarare could thus serve as a military courier, carrying documents securely through enemy territory with no risk of their being found if he were searched. Tarare was called on by Beauharnais to demonstrate his abilities before a gathering of the commanders of the Army of the Rhine. Having swallowed the box successfully, Tarare was given a wheelbarrow filled with 30 pounds of raw bull's lungs and liver as a reward, which he immediately ate in front of the assembled generals. Following this successful demonstration, Tarare became employed officially as a spy of the Army of the Rhine. Although General de Beauharnais was convinced of Tarare's physical capacity to carry messages internally, he was concerned about his mental state and reluctant to entrust him initially with significant military documents. Tarare was ordered as his first assignment to carry a message to a French colonel imprisoned by the Prussians near Neustadt. He was told that the documents were of great military significance, but in reality de Beauharnais had merely written a note asking the colonel to confirm that the message had been received successfully, and if so to return a reply of any potentially useful information about Prussian troop movements. Tarare crossed Prussian lines under cover of darkness, disguised as a German peasant. Unable to speak German, he soon attracted the attention of local residents, who alerted the Prussian authorities, and he was captured outside Landau. A strip search found nothing suspicious on his person. And despite being whipped by Prussian soldiers, he refused to betray his mission. Brought before the local Prussian commander, General Zogli, he again refused to talk and was imprisoned. After 24 hours of captivity, Tarare relented and explained the scheme to his captors. He was chained to a latrine, and eventually, 30 hours after being swallowed, the wooden box emerged. Zogli was furious when the documents, which Tarare had said contained vital intelligence, transpired only to be the Bohane's dummy message, and Tarare was taken to a gallows and the noose placed around his neck. At the last minute, Zogli relented, and Tarare was taken down from the scaffold, given a severe beating, and released near the French lines. Attempted cures. Following this incident, Tarare was desperate to avoid further military service, and returned to the hospital, telling Percy that he would attempt any possible cure for his appetite. Percy treated him with laudanum without success. Further treatments with wine vinegar and tobacco pills were likewise unsuccessful. Following these failures, Percy fed Tarare large quantities of soft-boiled eggs. But this also failed to suppress his appetite. Efforts to keep him on any kind of controlled diet failed. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for offal outside butchers' shops, and to fight stray dogs for carrion in gutters, alleys and rubbish heaps. He was also caught several times within the hospital drinking from patients undergoing bloodletting, and attempting to eat the bodies in the hospital mortuary. Other doctors believed that Tarare was mentally ill and pressed for him to be transferred to a lunatic asylum, but Percy was keen to continue his experiments, and Tarare remained in the military hospital. After some time, a 14-month-old child disappeared from the hospital, and Tarare was immediately suspected. Percy was unable or unwilling to defend him, and the hospital staff chased Tarare from the hospital, to which he never returned. Death. 4 years later, in 1798, Tessier of Versailles Hospital contacted Percy to notify him that a patient of theirs wished to see him. It was Tarare, now bedridden and weak. Tarare told Percy that he had swallowed a golden fork 2 years earlier, which he believed was lodged inside him and causing his current weakness. He hoped that Percy could find some way to remove it. Percy, however, recognized that he had advanced tuberculosis. A month later, Tarare began to experience continuous exudative diarrhea, dying shortly afterwards. The corpse rotted quickly. The surgeons of the hospital refused to dissect it. Tessier, however, wanted to find out how Tarare differed from the norm internally, and was also curious as to whether the gold fork was actually lodged inside him. At the autopsy, Tarare's gullet was found to be abnormally wide, and when his jaws were opened, surgeons could see down a broad canal into the stomach. His body was found to be filled with pus. His liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers and filling most of his abdominal cavity. The fork was never found. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?